Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your favorite twin, and we are back for another read aloud of The Smoking Mirror. So, I hope you all are having a good summer so far. I most certainly am, but I'm seeing that July is almost over. So, school will be here before we know it. So, let's all soak up the sun while we can. I'm saying all this, and it's going to be school when you guys are watching this. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's get started. Chapter 13. Carol screamed in her ragged bat voice as the winged serpent lunged through the air, seizing her brother in coils of shimmering red and gold. Pulling her own wings tight against her body, she dropped like a stone after them. The wind whistled past her sensitive ears in a warbling wail, but before she could reach Johnny, another huge iridescent snake emerged from the sulfuric mists and plucked her from the air with the tip of its twisting tail. Terrified, she squirmed around inside the serpent's unalterable grip, almost shifting before she remembered the bat was her only flight capable option if she got free. She soon realized she couldn't reach her animal talismans anyway, so she worked to calm herself down. It was difficult. She knew she was panicking, but couldn't remember what had gotten her here. Overcoming the Sowali attack, convincing the Kamatsuvab to help her, being saved by Sholotol from the icy whirlwinds only to watch him abandon her, all of those trials paled beside the psychological ordeal of facing the doppelgangers of her loved ones and hearing their dreadful but inescapably true pronouncements. Dad said that souls had their humanity stripped away bit by bit till only a wisp was left. I can't let that happen to me. I've got to hold on to who I am. Her captor veered left and then right, avoiding the superheated blasts of steam from below. Carol, her mind calmer, waited to discover where the creature was taking her. Hopefully, Johnny will be there too, and together we can figure out a way to escape. The worm's wings beat the hot air for several minutes before it began to descend into the large bull like caldera of a smoking volcano. Craning her head back, Carol saw that the crater contained a steaming lake, at the center of which stood an island of volcanic rock. Lava dribbled from a sort of shattered hill, draining down into the water in a glowing ribbon. Along the fiery stream, a massive black temple had been erected, its ziggurat steps reflecting the red with hellish fierceness. It was atop this temple that the flying serpent released Carol and landed, coiling its body beneath itself and digging winged claws into the black stone to support its upper half. It had no legs. Tightening her own talons around her clothes, Carol spread her wings, ready to attempt her escape. That would be quite useless. The voice was smooth and aristocratic, employing the cultured tones of a Spanish prince or Aztec emperor. Carol lowered her wings a bit as a man ascended the steps to stand a few yards away from her. He was tall and thin, and extravagantly dressed. On his head sat a golden circlet, part of a headdress from which a ridge of white feathers emerged, followed by blue-green plumes that swept backwards down the black downy cape draped over his broad shoulders. His skin was the faint blue of the dead except for strange golden tracings, ancient glyphs tattooed on cheeks, chest, and forearms. Around his eyes was a black mask that glittered with pinpricks of blue fire like the glowing azure of his irises. A loincloth of the same material hung to his knees. In his right hand he clutched a sinister-looking dart, and in his left a broad shield at the center of which had been mounted an obsidian mirror. Carol saw her bat form reflected in its depths and quailed. He smiled. To be sure, I invite you to make the attempt. My fire serpent, Shiokoro, would easily recapture you. However, even if he did not, I could bring you down with little effort. In fact, he pronounced with a slight tipping of his shield, you are now quite unable to escape. Irritated by his mocking tone, Carol flapped leathery wings, only to discover that he had been telling the truth. Some sorcery kept her talons firmly attached to the top of the pyramid. We need to converse, you and I, Carolina. Return to your normal form. Now. Carol stared at him with red eyes, and then gestured with her wing. He gave her his back, and it was her tonal that rather randomly sensed his cape was covered in eaglet down. Shifting into her human form, she pulled on undergarments, pants, and shirt. Shwekotl hissed softly, smoke curling from its nostrils. Carol jerked her chin up at it in a defiant gesture, and it flicked its forked tongue at her hungrily. As she bent to slip on her socks, she noticed a single shimmering scale that had flaked free of the winged serpent lying a few feet away. The seed of a plan began to germinate. She was slipping into her sneakers when the masked blue man faced her again. Better. Do you know who I am, Carolina Garza? No. Batman? A lucha libre wrestler? His grim smile conveyed a desire to break her bones slowly. I am Huitzilopochtli, you sniveling wench, resurrected warrior of the South, lord of sun and fire and battle. Do you know me? All right, we're going to answer that first question. What do you think Carol's plan is? Well, she's up to something, and you'll see some clues right here. Oh, and I should add that I'm asking you to make a prediction. So there's no way of knowing that you are right at this point, but what are the clues kind of suggesting? So we see right here, as she bent to slip on her socks, she noticed a single shimmering scale that had flaked free of the winged serpent lying a few feet away. The seed of a plan began to germinate. And then, as you recall, um, Carol has this charm, Johnny does too, um, where they have remnants of animals and those allow them to transform. So she has this scale. What is she thinking? If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use I think her plan is to blank. All right, let's continue. Carol recognized the name immediately. Her father had told her many stories of the arrival of the Aztecs in the Valley of Mexico. She had been fascinated by the nomadic Mexica tribe and how they had been forced to leave kingdom after kingdom until settling at Lake Texcoco, and how they had worked as mercenaries for decades until forming the Triple Alliance that in a century had conquered the entire Valley of Mexico. Dr. Garza had written several monographs about the first Moctezuma. That pre Columbian king had sought to erase the history of the nations he conquered and replace it with a glorified tale of Aztec dominance. His brother, the high priest, had developed a religious doctrine that required greater and greater human sacrifice to stave off disaster. They had elevated their bloodthirsty god of war to the head of their pantheon, the god the Aztecs worshipped above all others, the one who led them out of Aztlan down into Mexico. Huitzilopochtli's smile broadened. Very good. I see your father taught you well, Carolina. She stopped in the middle of tying her left sneaker. How do you know about my dad? I'm a god, little one. Of course I know. Carol scoffed. You're a cruel god. By the time they got to the Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs had really changed, huh? Human sacrifice. That was your idea, wasn't it? Conquering weaker nations, slaughtering men, women, and children to make sure the sun would rise. All that tragedy. The god made a dismissive gesture. Oh, enough. You and your Western notions of right and wrong. My people were not some pasty European race. They were warriors. The conquest of Mexico was their birthright. Whatever. Carol shook her head and stood, her shoelaces tied. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong, no matter what. Cruelty and murder are evil anywhere. Some god you turned out to be. My dad says you were probably just a human leader who got elevated to divine status after his death. Huitzilopochtli crossed the space between them in 3 broad strides. Do I look like a mere man to you, child? For 1,000 years I walked among the people that would become the Mexica, sustained by the Sawali, preparing the way for their dark destiny. No human elevated me to divinity, you stinking wolf. I won apotheosis by my own hands. I was translated to a perfect state through the power I alone learned to wield. Carol suddenly understood. Human sacrifice. That's how you got access to the shadow magic. And that's why you needed the Empire, the Flower Wars, the Temple Steps, all covered in blood and your name at the top of the list of gods. Tell me the truth. You didn't come up with the idea by yourself, did you? Somebody else showed you how to use Sawali and how to prep the Mexica, right? Maybe Tezcatlipoca? All right, let's go ahead and answer the second question. How did Huitzilopochtli gain access to the shadow magic? You'll find the answer you're looking for right here. I was translated to perfect state through the power I alone learned to wield. Carol suddenly understood. Human sacrifice, that's how you got access to the shadow magic. And then she goes on to say that's why you needed the Empire, these wars. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use he gains access to the shadow magic by blank. All right, let's continue. The god's blue eyes flamed with rage, like twin shards of brimstone in the nethermost regions of hell. Carol knew she was in great danger, but she couldn't stop. Her only chance for escape required she push this petty deity to his limits. I wonder what sort of people my ancestors would have been if they'd worshipped, say, Quetzalcoatl as their main god. Do not pronounce his name here, foolish girl. Huitzilopochtli's voice was cold and brittle. His protection is meaningless in Mictlan. Besides, the feathery worm knows the truth. Human life was stolen. He stole it. A price must be paid for it to continue. And his own temples flowed with the blood of sacrifice as well, lest you forget. I'm pretty sure that wasn't his idea. Huitzilopochtli lifted his dart and pointed it at her menacingly. You are too trusting of the worm and his mutt. But they cannot protect you. They cannot save your mother, either. You have mentioned Tezcatlipoca. In truth, he is a mighty force, one to which I bend my knee gladly. Under his aegis, I shall once again rule over humanity, and the blood of thousands will imbue my spirit with unimaginable might. His voice made her tremble, but she smirked as bravely as she could. We won't let you. Me and Johnny, Xochitl, Quetzalcoatl, Tonantzin, the mother of all. He simply stared at her, apoplectic. Almost there. Here I stand, the god of your ancestors, and you spit defiance at me. You are like Malintzin, turning your back on your people. Carol knew he meant Malianali Tonapel, the indigenous princess whose knowledge had helped Hernan Cortez defeat the Aztecs, the empire the young woman had blamed for the tragedies in her life. They weren't her people. Her people had to pay tribute to the Mexica. She probably believed she was helping to free them. Her only mistake was thinking that the Spaniards would be much better. Their view of the universe was also pretty messed up. I'll bet Tezcatlipoca had something to do with that, too. Didn't it ever occur to you that maybe he was pitting both sides against each other? He loves chaos and destruction, no? Wants to see the world end? Where do you fit in as a god of humanity if they're all dead? Now, he'll hit me, throwing me towards his monster snake, and I'll get my chance. It'll hurt, but I'll heal quick. Instead, Huitzilopochtli lowered his dart and nodded, his expression softening slightly. With a careless gesture, he let his shield tumble from his hand. It slapped against the black stone with a dull thud. I must admit, Carolina Garza, he said, his voice raspy with odd emotion, that you indeed have a point. Truth be told, the conundrum is why I had you brought here. You understand, do you not, what the Dark Lord intends to do? He means to break you and your brother, to unhinge your minds or twist your wills, so that you freely elect to place your social into his hands. Bringing together his shadowy sorcery and your savage magic, he will burst open the prison that contains the Tsutsumi, ancient star demons eager for your world's destruction. Carol trembled, and not just at the frustration of her plan. Though she had basically figured out Tezcatlipoca's endgame, to hear it stated so matter-of-factly was frightening. Still, she clung to the shreds of her bravery, keeping her head high. We're not that easy to break. The blue god's fist tightened around the dart as his free hand cut sharply through the acrid air. He has broken emperors, philosophers, saints, gods. I assure you there is no other possible outcome if you continue along the Black Road. If we continue, as opposed to what exactly? All right, let's answer that third question. What does Huitzilopochtli intend to do? You will find his dastardly plan in this paragraph right here. You understand, do you not, what the Dark Lord intends to do? He means to break you and your brother, to unhinge your minds or twist your wills, so that you freely elect to place your social into his hands. If you need a sentence starter, you can use he intends to blank. Okay, let's finish up the read aloud and answer the last question. Huitzilopochtli reached out and touched her cheek. She felt a nervous surge within her, a burble of feeling she couldn't decipher. Was that really me, or did he make that happen? Either way, gross. You ally with me. I can rally much of Mictlan under my banner, and together we can march against him and his bony puppets, enemy of my enemy, and so forth. Carol felt absolutely no desire to join forces with the bloodthirsty deity, nor did she believe for a second that he really wanted to overthrow Tezcatlipoca. But if I play along some, maybe I can still make my plan work. How can you expect me to trust you? I I won't lie. It's been really hard, and I'm not sure we can make it to the center, much less take him on. But you want to rule the world? You say you need our help. But what happens after? You can trust me, muttered the Aztec god of war, because I am telling you the truth. That's convincing. Once we have defeated Tezcatlipoca, I shall demand your loyalty. And if you choose to defy my sovereignty, I shall kill you. Until then, however, we can work as equals. Yeah, right. Prove it then. Take your spell away so I can move around. Huitzilopochtli shrugged and made a slight gesture with his right hand. You have been released, but I caution you. Should you attempt to wield your savage magic against me, my fire serpents will rend you to bloody bits. You're a real charmer. Do all your potential allies get this treatment? Oh, yeah, I forgot. The Empire. She stretched and inched slightly towards Shwekodal. Okay, if we're really going to hash this out, I need Johnny here. I can't make a decision without him agreeing to it. Nodding, the god lifted his head toward the gray sky. After a second or two, his eyes narrowed. How odd. What? Carol took another step to her left. I have called out to Tlacotl, the serpent that has your sibling in its care, but it does not respond. He grew grim and bristled with cold ire. For your sake, I hope. The Mexica god of war was unable to finish his sentence. Several things happened in very quick succession. A blue-green cloud hurtled down at Huitzilopochtli from above, surrounding him in a whirring blur that pulled at his cape and headdress, throwing him off balance. Xuicotl gave a roar of rage and leapt into the air. Carol threw herself to the ground, reaching her hand out and grasping the scale, setting her tonal free. Slipping from her clothes as her limbs retracted and reformed, she began to quickly grow in size. Deep in her belly, fire rumbled hungrily, and her massive wings arched as they drew the acrid air downward, lifting her bulk above the black temple. Immediately, she saw that the blue-green blur consisted of nearly 100 hummingbirds, their needle-like beaks pricking repeatedly at the masked god. Carol, it's me. Which one? All of them! Hurry! Well, I've got him freaked out. Xuicotl dove towards the cloud of birds, fire trembling in its jaws. Carol lashed out with the lower half of her body, striking the other serpent and sending it spinning towards Huitzilopochtli, spraying flame and smoke in haphazard spirals. The hummingbirds ripped the black cape away right before Xuicotl struck his master full on, catapulting the god off the temple. Enraged, the serpent recovered and swooped towards the figure now hurtling towards the river of lava. Huitzilopochtli stretched out his arms and halted mid-fall. Xuicotl ducked below him, and the god of war straddled the flying serpent like a steed. Together they focused on the charm of hummingbirds, their fire and dark energy building with a groaning thrum that Carol could feel in her very bones. The feather bits of Johnny flew together at the top of the temple, coalescing into the 12-year-old boy, who wore the stolen cape draped around his unclothed body. Stooping quickly, he grabbed Huitzilopochtli's shield and, remaining in a crouch, lifted it before him just as a blast of flame and blue energy hit. Johnny! Her fear for her brother's life and her rage surged within her. Her tonal, eager to release the fire that burned in her gut, hungrily soaked up the savage magic that her emotions tapped. As a white-hot stream blazed from her impervious jaws, she saw that the obsidian mirror at the center of the shield was reflecting most of the attack, hurling it back at Huitzilopochtli. Her fire and the ricochet merged and slammed into the god of war and his serpent, shoving them violently into the stream of lava below. Carol, Johnny screamed, standing. Let's get the hell out of here, quick! He gripped the black cape tightly about him and transformed, becoming an enormous harpy eagle. The cape melted into his morphed flesh. With razor-sharp talons, he scooped up the shield and took to the gray, ash-filled sky. That was better than the lechuza, huh? I think I figured out the clothes trick. Good thing, too. That other snake burned mine up. Carol dipped her tail down, curled the tip around her own clothes, shoes, and water jug, and followed him out of the caldera. How did you get free? I grabbed the little feather and figured I'd shift into a small bird, get away. But like halfway through the transformation, my tonal kind of refused to go smaller, like maybe there's a limit or something. I was panicking, but the idea of a whole flock of birds popped into my head, and I guess I used social to make it happen. Carol did a barrel roll to avoid a plume of ash lifting from a crater below. Does it feel weird? What, being spread out across 100 little brains? Yeah. Kind of cool, too. All these little parts of me that I'm not normally aware of. They gotta work together. You'll have to try it. But maybe not when you're being pursued by a dragon thingy. I tried to keep my clothes draped across a bunch of hummingbirds, but it blew fire on us, on me, I mean, and that was that. But I could maneuver better. I led it to a field of, like, steam geysers. Eventually, one erupted right in our flight path. I managed to get out of the way, but the snake got barbecued. Well, thank God you showed up when you did. That was an Aztec demon? God, Huitzilopochtli. He was trying to convince me that we needed to join up with him and overthrow Tezcatlipoca, and then install him as ruler of humanity. Megalomaniac much? Right? But like the doppelgangers, his real purpose was to get me scared, I think. Make me doubt myself. Doubt our ability to rescue Mom. Huh. The moron basically gave us two more weapons to use. This cape is really powerful, Carol. I think Wheatsley whatever was a Nagual too. And his shield, you saw how it deflected all that power. Yes, but Johnny, those belong to a man who became a god using Swahili. I don't think you can trust the shield or the cape. Promise me that the minute you sense something wrong, you'll get rid of them. Waves of reassurance came from her brother. Of course, sis, but I think I can handle them fine. Still, Carol worried as her massive wings rode the hot wind. What if the point of this desert had been to put those weapons in her brother's hands? She'd have to keep careful watch. Johnny had a habit of overestimating his own abilities. Since he was good at nearly everything he tried, he was never really prepared for the time when he sucked at something, and he would sometimes end up over his head in trouble as a result. Carol's concern took a back seat as the beating of dozens of massive wings came from all around them. A group of fire breathing flying serpents was converging on them, presumably furious at what the twins had done to their master. Johnny turned and flew backwards, raising the shield with his talons to deflect their flaming attacks. Carol ducked and weaved as she flew, narrowly avoiding streams of fire. When a worm would get too close, she'd blast it from the sky with her social enhanced blaze. In this way, the twins were chased through yellow sulfuric clouds and mists of cooling steam. Below them, the lava fields and geysers gradually gave way to a vast ashen plain. The worms gave a final shriek of rage and turned aside. 5 deserts down, 4 more to go. Okay, let's answer the last question. What does Carol say is one of Johnny's weaknesses? Pay attention to this little bit right here. She'd have to keep careful watch. Johnny had a habit of overestimating his abilities. Since he was good at nearly everything he tried, he was never really prepared for the times when he sucked at something. If you'd like a sentence starter, you can use she thinks one of his weaknesses is blank. Whew, that was an action packed chapter. I hope you all enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care.